Welcome to Paradigm Shift Parenting, a podcast for women who make their lives better by first making themselves better. At Paradigm Shift Parenting, we believe that self-improvement is the highest form of self-care. Each episode, we're going to either shift our mindset about something, explore the myth that motherhood and martyrdom are synonymous, replace the oh-so-trendy victimhood mentality with a healthy dose of accountability and responsibility, or simply explore the shared experiences of modern motherhood. I'm your imperfect host, Binky Bell, and I'm glad you're here.
Alright, hey guys, welcome back to another episode. Today we are going to do a follow-up to last week's episode about anger and rage in motherhood, because I have been talking with a lot of you in my DMs on Instagram about anger, about rage, and the expression of it towards our children, towards our families as mothers. And a lot of us are struggling with it. A lot of us have had experience with it. And the overall vibe that everybody gave me was, the overall tone of everybody's message was, okay, we have a problem. What do we do to fix it? Where are the solutions? Because I do always focus on solutions, right? I'm always saying, let's focus on shared solutions, not shared struggle. So today I am going to share with you some things that I've done, what I've learned, my general opinion on what anger really is, where it's coming from, and how we can properly manage anger without acting out, without lashing out, taking it out on our kids or our families, okay? Because we don't want to do that, right? So towards the end, I'm going to give you 4 things that you can start doing today. 4 things that you can start doing to begin working on this anger issue, working on our expression of anger. Those 4 things, that's going to be the meat of the episode. You really don't want to miss that. So please stick with me for this episode really quick. Stay towards the end so we can start talking about those 4 things. You really don't want to miss it, okay? But before we can get to those 4 things, we really need to go over some ground rules here. I want everyone to understand that not everything I say has to resonate with you. In fact, not everything I say will resonate with you, and that's okay. Not everything I say is going to be true for everyone, because we're living different lives, right? And that's okay. If something I say is untrue for you, if it doesn't resonate, you can just use that to clarify your own beliefs and your own opinions, right? So it'll still benefit you, even if we disagree on stuff. We can disagree. That's okay. All right. Everything that I'm doing here is just me speaking from my experiences, and I don't ever want to give the illusion that there's like an XYZ kind of formula for growth or for healing or self-improvement. I only hope that by sharing my opinions and ideas that it'll spark something in you that will inspire you to either start taking action or keep taking action. To start living intentionally, continue to improve your life, continue to grow, continue to work on your marriage and your relationship with your kids, right? That's all I want to do here. So first, I want to talk about what anger is. We all know what it feels like. We know the physical sensation whenever we get angry. Some of us get really hot. Like for me, my ears turn red and I get really hot. Some of us feel it first in our stomach and it rises up in our chest. We know the feeling. But the thing about anger is that it is never just anger. Anger does not exist alone. I think of anger as kind of like this big brother emotion. And what I mean by that is that it's usually something like fear or sadness or guilt or shame that have an issue. That's really what we're feeling. And then they bring big brother anger in to the playground to pick their fights, because things like fear and sadness and guilt and shame are vulnerable emotions. They don't feel good, and we have a natural aversion to vulnerability, and it's easy to mask with anger, because anger's action and it's strength, and it's giving the illusion of regaining control, right? Because you're feeling something else. You're feeling maybe like you're back in control, right? Now, anger itself, I don't necessarily believe to be a bad thing. I'm trying really hard lately to kind of step back from emotions and not give them positive or negative labels, because I think that emotions really aren't positive or negative. I think a negative emotion is really, we label them negative because they don't necessarily feel good to experience. But if we can start to separate ourselves from the experience of the emotion, we can begin to see how emotions really aren't anything more than kind of a personal navigation system, right? They're little bells and whistles that let us know what direction we're headed in. Emotions, I think, especially things like anger, are meant to be first felt, feel them first, right? And then understood. It's not enough to just feel and express the emotion anymore. We need to start digging in a little bit. We need to start figuring out where the emotion is really, really, truly coming from. That's why when people say that you need to sit with your feelings, when people say you need to control your emotions, it's often misinterpreted as suppressing your emotions. That's a bad idea. We're not talking about suppressing emotions here. We're not talking about suppressing anger. To control your emotions is really to just recognize them, to properly identify them, figure out what the real root emotion is, and then respond in an appropriate, responsible way, right? It's really a difference between controlling your emotions and being controlled by them. And I guess while we're on the topic of how we speak about emotions and what power we're giving them, something that I've started doing is, instead of saying I'm mad, I've started saying I'm feeling mad. Because, and this might sound a little bit strange to some of you, but stick with me for a second. If I say I'm mad, I am not mad. I am not the anger, right? I, the true me, the divine I, the part of the collective consciousness, or the part that is aligned with God, or whatever you choose to believe, the true I is not the anger. This sounds a little crazy, I know. I, the big I am the person that's able to observe the emotion. It's not enough to just say, I am angry, because you are not the anger. You are the person that's able to step back and observe that emotion. You are not mad. You are able to recognize that you're feeling mad. And I think ultimately that's where we're trying to get ourselves with our emotions, to learn to be an observer of them, to observe them, and not become the expression of them. We become the emotion when we let it take over, when we lose control and get out of alignment with our truest self, the best version of ourselves that we're trying to be. So by saying I'm feeling mad versus saying I am mad, for me, it creates this tiny space. It creates just the smallest space for me, and it's like you get to step outside of the emotion and be able to observe it a little bit better, a little bit more objectively, and kind of figure out, play around, see what you're really feeling. It creates a space, a pause for me to say, like, whoa, I'm feeling very mad. What's going on with this? Where's it coming from? What's really going on? Instead of saying, I'm mad and I have to express it and project it out on everyone around me, right? So I don't know, maybe try it. I think that the words that we say and the things that the words we say and use are really powerful, and I think they have the ability to create small shifts with our belief systems, right, and how we operate. So with that being said, that's all nice. We've figured out what anger really might be. But what do we do when we're pissed off? When we know that we're about to lose our minds on our kids and we're about to yell at them, or worse? Like I said, I'm going to share 4 things that I want you to do today if you're struggling with anger. Specifically, if you're struggling with yelling at your kids, if you're struggling with belittling them, if you are the type of person to get mad and wag your finger and say, why can't you just do this? Why, look at what you did, or you're making me so crazy. If you say things like that, if you're like me, if you've done things like that, or worse, if you're losing your cool and hitting your kids, slamming things, throwing things, if you experience those things, then when people bring it up, we kind of want to slink back a little bit because it doesn't feel good, right? We know that we do these things and we know we feel like shit for doing them, right? So you get hit with a little bit of shame, a little bit of guilt, and you just want to move on because you don't want to sit in these crappy feelings of shame and guilt. And I get it. I truly, truly get it. And again, this is where I have a little bit different opinion on mom guilt. I've said it before, I'm going to say it again. Sometimes the guilt you feel is justified. Sometimes we should feel guilty, right? Sometimes we fuck up and we should feel guilty for it. But the admission of guilt doesn't mean you're a bad mother. It means you made a bad choice. And admitting that your choices and behaviors are bad by your own standards, that's a good thing to do, okay? We're not going to be digging our heels in and ignoring those feelings of guilt anymore. We're going to sit down with them and figure out if they're valid, okay? Now, as I've said, 4 things you can do. We're going to start getting into those. And I don't want to be dramatic, but at the same time, I cannot express this enough. If you are struggling with anger, I want you to actually do these things. I want you to really do the things that I'm going to be talking about are verbs, and I want you to do them. Too often we passively absorb information, and we think that that's enough. We think that because we watched the video, listened to the podcast, read the book, that'll be enough to create the change that we're looking for, to create the change that brought us. We're looking for change, and that's why we bought the book, listened to the podcast, watched the video. But it's not enough. And I speak from experience on this. I've done it a lot. I'm getting a lot better about actually doing things versus talking about them, thinking about them, right? The action's where it's at, okay? Because I say again, you are the only person that can give your children a happy, healthy mother. And that's the goal here, right? So, step number 1, the first thing I want you to do if you have a problem with rage, with anger, I want you to call it what it is to yourself. I want you to sit down and think about what your problem is, and I want you to identify it. And I want you to physically write this down. We need to get to a point where we can say and admit to ourselves, I have a problem with yelling. And I want you to think about how you feel when it's building up, when you've yelled, and I want you to identify and be brutally honest with how you feel afterwards. Why do you think it's a problem? And what do you think is going to happen if you don't get it fixed? If you don't improve in this area, what's going to happen? And what is that going to feel like? And again, this exercise is not to shame anybody. It's not to make you feel more ashamed. But if we are going to treat a problem, we have to properly identify it, and we have to be honest with what it is. And it's not doing anybody any good to sugarcoat things, okay? Because we're good at lying to ourselves. We're not lying to ourselves anymore. We have a problem with anger. We're gonna get it fixed, okay? So that's what I want you to do. First step, write down what your problem is. Is it yelling? Is it throwing things? Is it everything? What are we working with? Exactly, okay? And you don't have to share this with anybody. This is for you. This is just for you to get a grasp of the problem, okay? Now that we've identified the problem, the second thing you can start doing is look for a pattern. Look for a pattern in your anger. Are you getting mad at the same time every day? Are you getting mad at the same circumstances? Are there certain situations that always bring out the anger in you? We have to first look for a pattern, because sometimes the cure to our anger problem is a little bit of prevention. For example, if your kids are school age, if they're going to school, and you find that you're just losing your mind every morning, yelling at everybody to get ready, you're sending the kids off to school, they're crying, you're wondering if the teacher is going to have some awkward conversation with you about why your kids' eyes are puffy every morning because you're sending them to school, sobbing. If you yourself are crying every morning because you're losing your mind, yelling at your kids, trying to get everybody out the door on time, the solution is probably a little bit of prevention, right? Get your routines in order, set yourself up for a good morning. I don't know exactly because I don't know your circumstances, but look for areas of your life where you can say, oh my God, I'm losing my mind at the same situation every day. Is there something I can do to fix it? Can I put a little bit of prevention in this? Sometimes I had a conversation with somebody who was, her child was acting a fool at the grocery store, right? And we've all been there where our kids just don't behave properly at the times that we want them to. And I actually have someone in my family whose child does this. The kid is just crazy in the store all the time. And this creates a situation every time they go to the store where kid acts crazy, mom loses her mind, yells, spanks, is embarrassed, whatever the situation is, then we feel guilty, and then we start into the mental cycle of I'm such a bad mom, blah, blah, blah. We lose control, right? Solution then is stop taking your kid to the grocery store, right? If your kid's losing their damn mind every time you go to the grocery store, we have grocery delivery, grocery pickup, grocery services. You can send your husband, send your mama, figure out a solution that gives you space so you don't have to take your kid to the grocery store, right? Sometimes we just need to prevent the situation altogether, revisit it in 6 months whenever your kid has grown a little bit more. Maybe they'll behave a little bit better. But let's stop putting ourselves in situations that allow us to go crazy. Another one is going out to restaurants if you have a baby or a toddler. Sometimes we have to accept the fact that, we just can't do these things. If we're having a frustrating, terrible time every time we take our kid to a restaurant, sometimes the solution is to stop waiting for the child to adjust to the surroundings and just stop putting them in situations where they're going to fail, right? Where they've historically proven that they're going to fail this test of behaving properly in these situations, okay? Step number 3, okay? So first, we've admitted we have a problem. Step number 2, look for patterns and see if there are things that we can relieve, things that can make our lives better, if there are routines that we can implement for these problem times, these high stress times, transition times, right? Step number 3, evaluate and lower your expectations. Evaluate your expectations. Too often, too many parents expect more from their children than their children are capable of giving them. If you have a toddler and you're expecting them to keep their playroom spotless and clean every time they're done playing with their toys, and it's making you mad, it's making you yell at your kids, you are expecting too much from them. And it's not your child's fault, it's yours. Your expectations are too high. Lower them a little bit, meet your child where they are, and give them some space, okay? I mean, truly, we expect so much from our kids. And let's think about the fact that there are adults, people in their 30s and 40s, who have a hard time with impulse control. We have adults running around working jobs, buying homes, who have close to no impulse control. And yet we think that a child who's been alive for 4 years, 6 years, should be behaving properly, when these are things that adults haven't even figured out for themselves, right? Let's cut some slack. Let's calm down a little bit. Stop expecting our children who are new to this earth to behave like mature adults whenever there are a lot of adults who can't behave maturely. right? I think it's very funny that we get so upset, and it is frustrating to have children cry and throw fits and stuff. It's very frustrating, very triggering. I get it. But let's just continue to think about the fact that we lose our minds and yell at our children because they're losing their minds and yelling. And it's just this constant circle of, frankly, fuckery. Like, we can't expect our children to control their emotions when we can't control our emotions, because we're all here listening to this episode because we have a problem controlling our anger, right? So let's just calm down a little bit. We can calm down a little bit, I think, right? So again, look at your children, evaluate if you're just expecting too much from them. Sometimes we are, and it doesn't mean, whenever we lower our expectations of our children's behavior, we get the feeling that sometimes we're letting them get away with something, or we're training them to be bad kids. And lowering your expectations doesn't mean that they're going to stay in this behavior for so long. What it means is that you're going to give them more time to learn this, and you're going to be there to help them learn how to behave properly. Okay, all it means is that we're going to stop punishing our kids for not knowing what they don't know. We're going to give them a break, right? Okay, that's the third thing. Number 4, and this is one of my personal favorite things to do, you're going to set up a code word, a safe word. You're going to set up a code word for yourself and your kids. This is something that I've done whenever I started the Orange Rhino Challenge that I've talked about before, the challenge to stop yelling at your kids. The code word, there's a few steps in here. First, what we're going to do is have a conversation with your kids. If they're old enough to understand, take some time after you've done these first 3 things. And again, I want you to really do these things. After you do them, sit down with your kids, have an honest conversation with them. And this conversation is not about them. This conversation is about you. I want you to sit down and tell your children, I have been feeling mad lately. I have been yelling at you more than I want to. I have been getting angry at you so much, and I don't want to anymore. Your kids can understand this. If you are honest and sincere with your children, they're going to understand so much more than you could imagine. What I've done personally with my children is I've sat them down and I have said, you know what, I am behaving like a crazy person. I'm treating you guys badly. I'm yelling at you. I'm blaming you for things that are not your fault. And that's not fair. I don't want to do that. I don't want to be that type of mother. So I really want to get better. I want to do better because you guys don't deserve to be yelled at and treated like this. Okay? These are all things that are absolutely true for me. I believe these things, and they're easy to say with sincerity because I believe them, and I think it's important that our children know this, okay? So first, we're going to apologize for our behavior to our children, and then we're going to give them a tool that they can use too. We're going to use it, they're going to use it, and that is a safe word. We're going to give them a safe word. Mine, because I was doing the Orange Rhino, was Orange Rhino. And the deal was, I told my kids, because sometimes we get mad and there's no grace period. There's no period where we're like, ooh, I'm getting mad. Like, sometimes it's boom, pissed, it's over, right? So what I told my children was, if something's happening and you start feeling like I'm getting too angry, if I start raising my voice, if you start feeling scared of my behavior or my tone, you can say Orange Rhino, and that is our cue. Everything stops. Everything stops. Conversation's over. I'm not saying anything else. They're not going to say anything else. It's a full stop, long pause to let those emotions diffuse a little bit. Okay? Now, the way that I use the word for them is if there's a lot of chaos going on, because I get very, like, noise and clutter can make me angry. So if I get to a point where there's just too much going on and I feel like I want to yell, if I'm getting to that point, then it's Orange Rhino, I need a break. Like, we need to calm down. Not we need to calm down, like they need to stop doing what they're doing, but it is just an admission to them that I am feeling crazy and I'm about to say something that I don't want to say, so I need a break. It's kind of, a lot of people do this, a lot of parents, like, they call it putting yourself in timeout. That's what it is. And I think for me, I think it's good because it allows children to see that sometimes what they're doing, it can have an effect on people, right? They're not completely innocent, like they're not, they have an effect on their surroundings, right? I think children need to know that, but I think that they need to not be blamed for it. So I think that using the safe word, it just allows them to see, like, okay, this amount of noise, the fighting or whatever is going on has an effect on mom, right? But then it's showing them that you can be affected and not react. So you can say your code word and you can say, I need a space from this. We'll talk about it whenever I'm calm, right? Because too often we think that we have to address an issue immediately, and we don't. You really don't. There's no situation so dire, most of the time, that requires an immediate reaction and immediate response. It's okay to just pause. And that is what this safe word or this code word is good for. And I think it's an empowering tool for our children to use. I know a lot of married couples who use this too. They have a code word, all conversation pauses, and we revisit the situation whenever we're calm. And then what that does is, because we took the break, we can handle it appropriately whenever the emotional charge has gone away, and we get to go to bed knowing that we didn't lose our shit on our kids and make anybody feel bad. We handled it responsibly. Doesn't everybody want that? Isn't that great? So let's recap really quickly. If you're struggling with anger, if you want to stop yelling at your kids, you want to stop losing your mind all the time, admit that you have a problem. Step number 1, write it down. Be brutally honest. How does it make you feel when you yell at your kids? How is it going to make you feel if you never fix this problem? Are you going to get worse? If it stays the same, is that going to be something that you're proud of? Are you going to be proud of the job that you're doing? I'm not saying you should feel ashamed. This is for you to determine. You get to pick your own standards, and that's what we're doing. What are your standards? Are you meeting them? Okay. Step number 2, look for a pattern. Where in the day are you getting angry? What's upsetting you? Is it the same time? Is it the same situation? Is there something that we can fix with that time of day or that situation to create harmony? Stop creating situations that make us angry. Step number 3, evaluate your expectations of your kids. Are you expecting just too much from them? Are you asking too much? Can you lower them and relieve the expectations from them? Give yourself a break. Not everything has to be solved and fixed and pleasant right now, right? Can we lower the expectations a little bit? Step number 4, set up that code word for your kids. Give them a chance to say, you are scaring me. Okay, that's empowering for your children to be able to admit and tell you that your behavior makes them scared. Give them that tool. They need that, and then respect them when they use it. Okay, because another thing that we need to think about, especially if you have very young children, even if you're short like me, I'm only 5'3". If you're short like me and our kids are only a couple feet tall, you are a giant and you are their whole world. So when you're losing your minds, yelling at them, it's terrifying. It is terrifying. I don't know if you had, what type of parents you had, but I'm sure you have the ability to imagine somebody who is more than twice your size bearing down at you, yelling at you throwing things around you. Can you imagine how frightening that is? How scary that is? Truly put yourself in your child's shoes. That's why we're fixing it, right? Because you're not a scary person. You're not a bad mother. We just got a little anger problem, and that's what we're gonna fix, okay? If you do these exercises, please come by and let me know. Let me know. And I can't say it again, I hope that you do these, like actually do them. Start working on them, identify the problem, see what you can do to fix it for yourself. Guys, if you do this, come by my Instagram at Paradigm Shift Parenting and let me know how it's going. I'll see you in the next episode.